Okay, we're talking about the way that algorithms are changing society, and we're finally going to talk about the problem of deepfakes. And we'll use our familiar framework for that. We'll use these 6 questions to examine different aspects of the problem in order to think through it thoroughly. Okay, so a deepfake, I think everyone knows what deepfakes are, but just a still image. It could be a still image, video, or audio file. It's manipulated purposefully, and it makes you think something happened that didn't actually happen, or it depicts something happening that didn't actually happen. Okay, so what could go wrong, right? Just kidding. Obviously, there's ethical issues all over the place here. Now, what I'm not talking about, however, is maybe the first thing that came to your mind, which is that in a case where someone is used in a deepfake video without their consent, some real person is used without their consent. And the reason I'm not talking about that is not because it's not an ethical problem, but because it's such an obvious ethical problem that I don't need to make a video about it. It should never happen. It's and especially if we're talking about non-consensual pornography, things like that. It's just pure evil, right? It should never never happen. Period. Right? We don't need to have a debate about that. So I'm not talking about that. We already know that's bad. So what am I talking about? I'm not talking about fake news in general. That is something related to deepfakes that I have a separate video about. There's a separate video you can see. I'm mostly talking about when deepfakes are delivered by fake news. That's at least what I'm most concerned with. Okay, so the overlap of those two circles. There's also talking about deepfakes in general, like the part outside of the circle. And that's a little more nuanced. I mean, there are clearly evil cases, right? The one I just mentioned, a non-consensual use of a real person to make a deep fake. But there's other cases that are a little more nuanced. But I definitely want to call out that fake news is its own thing that deserves its own conversation. And the concern that I have mostly has to do with fake news that is delivered by deep fakes. I think that needs to be talked about directly. Okay, so what's familiar here? Well, we manipulate images as long as we've had images, as long as photography has been around. There's little edits to photography. It wasn't that much longer before you could, before moving pictures, films, were possible, and then we could make some edits to those. And in the age of digital technology, with Photoshop and movie editing software, that of course became even easier. So we've had this steady progression of there's ways to change images, still and moving, to make you think something, to depict something that didn't actually happen. So basically, we are very familiar with false stories being presented as real. Okay, that's not particularly new. What is particularly new? I think there's several new aspects to this problem, and I'm going to talk about 4 of them. One of them, I think, is related to the scale of digital technology, and the other 3 are going to be related to the capabilities of digital technology. So let me start with the scale one. Okay, so these images that were edited, they're very limited in the way they could be distributed, right? They were distributed more or less to limited audiences, sometimes one person at a time. We can call this a piecemeal distribution. But because of that piecemeal distribution, it created a natural bottleneck where vetting was possible. We had time to vet, right? So it's like this manipulated image could be presented to some people, but then people could weigh in and be like, this is a manipulated image, right? And so by the time that other people become aware of it, they already know that it's a manipulated image. So that's been a great thing because that's prevented fake images from reaching a critical mass, right? So there's this if you can imagine a certain number of people accept it, and then it gains its own kind of momentum. It's been very, very rare for that to be able to happen in a pre-deepfake age. But of course, now that time for vetting is gone, thanks to algorithms, they can distribute a manipulated image in a very efficient, quick way to lots of people. It can gain critical mass of acceptance. There's also some things that I think are importantly new about the capabilities because of the capabilities of digital technology. So, one problem that we're facing as a civilization is what we might call the problem of unshared spaces. People, unshared spaces, used to be like the norm for millennia. And then there was this time, in the last century or two, I don't know, but where people were more or less getting their news from like the same kinds of organizations. There was these like centralized vetted sources that people would get their news from. And now we're back to this, to the way that civilization was for millennia, where people are back, getting all their news from, one source that I might, I could be an active news consumer, but not even be aware of what's going on in this other space. Okay, so because we have unshared spaces, that more easily allows for false information in general, but specifically the deepfakes to proliferate. Right. So instead of like an expert stepping in, oh, I'm from the New York Times and I'm saying this is a deepfake image. Well, this could be like this falsehood could be proliferating for a long time in these other spaces that do not care what the New York Times says, that has no bearing on their lives, and they're just conspiracy theory sort of stuff, right? So because of deepfakes also, this false information can be delivered by a trusted source. And of course that's not real, but like that's just using somebody's image to deliver the information via deepfake. I think that's a different thing. That's just a new thing in human history, something that we haven't dealt with before. And related to that, fourth is sort of related to 3, but maybe it's a different point. I don't know this. I haven't done any research on this, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's like a natural suspicion that's built in, from us living life, and maybe even related to biological things, the way we've evolved, that we just have a natural suspicion. It's like we're told a story and we have this like maybe kind of natural way. It's like, oh, let's find out if this story is real. We're used to that, right? But deepfakes assault our senses, our sight, there's the sounds, and I don't know if we're ready for that. I don't know if our brains are set up to naturally be suspicious when we see, someone who's like claiming to be the president of the United States declaring martial law or something like that. I don't know if we're ready to, our brains are set up to be like, is this a deep fake? I don't know if that's the first question we're going to ask. Okay, what ethical values are relevant? Now, okay, so if we're talking about the first example that I gave, a real person being used without their consent in deepfake, that's autonomy. But the issue that I've been more interested in this video is the issue of trust. So this is a deep one, right? I mean, we're talking about civilizations could be undermined by deepfakes. This is a really big deal. And I want to talk a bit about the solutions. I have some strong opinions here. So, one thesis that, people don't present this as my thesis, and here it is, but it's more like an undercurrent of thought. It's like an assumption that a lot of people have. So I'm going to call it the value neutrality thesis. So the idea of this thesis is that technology in itself is morally neutral. It's not good or bad. It's only made good or bad by the way that people choose to use it. Okay, so this is a very familiar line of thinking. So the example that almost everyone goes to first is hammers. They say, okay, a hammer. Think about a hammer. A hammer, that's not evil, it's not good, it's just a hammer, right? So the evil or goodness depends on how people choose to use it. Do you want to use it to build a house, or do you use it to hit someone on the head? So that's where the evil comes from, or that's where the goodness comes from, is how people choose to use it. Okay, great. Analogy police, come with me. Let's think about whether deepfakes are similar to hammers in the important ways. They're both examples of technology, but what other similarities do they have? I would say that not many other similarities. First of all, let's just talk about percentages. How likely is that technology to be misused? We're just talking about probabilities here. So how often are hammers misused? I'm going to guess it's like 0.000000000, add some zeros, 1, right? Hammers are by and large used in a constructive way, literally in construction. So are there people that have used hammers to hurt people? Of course. But that's not likely. If we had if we lived in a world where like people went around with hammers and hurt each other on the street like every day, I would favor passing a law limiting, how many hammers can be sold, and like people have to register their hammers. So it's just an empirical fact that people don't misuse hammers, and so that means that I don't care about hammer regulation. It's fine. Compare that to deepfakes. How often are deepfakes going to be used for good versus for evil? The percentages are going to be way different, right? I would say that deepfakes are going to be used in order to trick somebody, in order to manipulate them a lot. Can they be used every once in a while to like put some character in a movie that wasn't there? Sure, and that makes us all happy, and we are entertained. But it's a moral responsibility to think about percentages. Okay. A second dissimilarity is that misuse by hammers is limited, right? So if some person wants to go off on a hammer rampage, there's like a limited amount of damage that they're going to be able to do before they're stopped from doing any more damage. That is not how deepfakes are going to work. And related to this, we can ask the how bad could it get question. Right, so the worst case scenario is that some crazy person goes around with a hammer and then they're arrested, right? And they do maybe some damage, they hurt a few people. But deepfakes, we're talking about the potential to undermine a society. Okay, so that is very, very bad. So those are some reasons that we need to stop with the value neutrality thesis. Just because there are some technologies that are more or less morally neutral, that does not mean that all of them are. And in fact, I would say that deepfakes are not neutral at all. So, we need a verification system, but I want to get beyond that here. Like, we need to have a way to know what something is a deepfake and what is not. Of course we need that. But I want to get deeper than that to actually question the value of deepfakes in general. I am not an idiot. I know how technology works. I know that we can't just have there be no deepfakes tomorrow. I know that there's just deepfakes are coming. They're inevitable. But let's start by thinking about when they are acceptable. That's actually very difficult to figure out when a deepfake might be okay. Okay, so I can only think of 3 examples. Maybe if I thought a little bit harder, I could come up with a 4th or 5th, or maybe you have some you want to drop in the comments. I would say one way they're acceptable is when there's audio or video fakes of a non-existing person who's not delivering fake news. For example, an advertisement, right? So if it's a person that doesn't exist, an AI made them up, and they're trying to sell you soap, that's fine. That's fine. I don't have any problem with that. Okay, so we can also, would be audio or video fakes of a real person, but they're created with their consent and they're not delivering fake news. So this would be like Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford in a movie. There's surely some AI version of him that, was younger in a recent Indiana Jones movie. And he signed on to it, and I'm sure he got paid a lot for his name, image, likeness to be used like that. That's fine, right? It was just, even if people didn't know, I'm sure, the vast majority of people were like, Harrison Ford isn't that young. But maybe some people were tricked. They didn't know that was a deep fake. That's fine. It wasn't delivering fake news. It was just entertainment, and it was consensual, right? He signed up for it. It's fine. I would also say images, still images, provided they're labeled, right? Provided they have a little label that says, a deep fake. There's really not a lot of other cases where I think deep fakes are acceptable. So Other than that, I think there should just be like really, really harsh legal penalties for deepfakes. Now, as I mentioned, a verification system is extremely important. I've got to believe that we're always well not. I believe that there's ways to detect deepfakes, and I know it's going to be like, oh, the deepfakes get more real and they get more sophisticated, but there's going to be more sophisticated ways of detecting. I think there's always going to be some technology to detect deepfakes to say, hey, I don't think this is real. Okay, so yeah, we need to put our priority on that, but there's a limit to that, right? So, one thing we can think about is penalizing creators of deepfakes, right? And harshly, right? Even if they say, "Oh, I thought it was just a joke," I guarantee somebody didn't get the joke. I think if someone creates a deepfake and it wasn't one of those first three reasons, we should just have really harsh laws. Even if they say I didn't know, or like they slap the law on it, because again, this is about undermining social trust. This is about being able to still have a society. I don't think we can really afford to screw around with this one. Even if it ruins somebody's day and they didn't, they weren't creating a deep fake in a mean way, they meant it to be a joke, but it doesn't matter. I think I think it shouldn't matter. I think we just shouldn't have them outside of those first three contexts. Maybe more realistic. I mean, the creators, it's probably going to be really hard to find who created it, right? But I think what we can do is penalize the distributors, people that forward deepfakes. And again, this is going to catch some people like unfairly. They're like, "Well, I didn't know this is a deepfake," and they're probably telling the truth. But what we have to develop is a system where if you distribute it, especially a video file. Of the president declaring martial law, and you were tricked, I think there should still be a legal penalty for you, because again, maybe that's not totally fair, but we can't afford to mess around with this. We can't afford to have people just forward deep fakes into their networks and say, "Oh, I didn't know it was a deep fake." It's like people have to get used to developing a responsibility around figuring out whether something is a deep fake before they forward it. All right, rant over. That's a bit about the problem of deepfakes.